Hello, this lecture corresponds to Chapter 3 of the textbook, Comprehensive and Strategic Land Use Planning for Sustainability. The planning, in this section of the lecture, I'm going to discuss some of the planning challenges that directly relate to sustainability and environmental planning, and what sorts of responses there have been. The overall objective, of course, under sustainable development is to create communities that are compact, energy efficient, ecological, and just. This is done through a variety of ways, such as compact urban design, energy efficient transportation and buildings, protecting and conserving natural resource lands and ecosystems, and integrating social and environmental justice concerns into plans. So one of the main challenges of land use planning is arresting sprawl. Sprawl, of course, is low density development that tends to extend widely into the land around a community. It's low density because it typically consists of single family residences and sprawling commercial development. We all know sprawl. So some of the ways to address this challenge is a growth management approach. And these strategies typically involve controlling the location, the scale, the timing, and the cost of development. So those four characteristics are objects of interest to growth management. Under smart growth, the strategy would be to organize development within and around a community toward the existing built-up areas and around existing infrastructure and away from natural resource and agricultural lands. So let's try to direct development towards where it already is in our region. New urbanist designs or new urbanism. These are development designs that are typically at the sub-regional or even sub-community level, focusing on a sort of a neighborhood level. The development under new urbanism is compact, it's mixed use, and it's pedestrian oriented within the neighborhood. There are also strong transit connections within that design for connection to the region in which the neighborhood is located. Another approach to arresting sprawl is a regionalist strategy, or regionalism, where there's an effort to organize transportation systems, housing, economic development, and natural and environmental resources at a regional scale. There's a focus on those things that tend to transcend political boundaries. Another challenge that's faced today in creating communities that are sustainable is how do we manage our shrinking cities? And by that, the classic example of a shrinking city is Detroit, which went from 1 million people to, I don't know, I think there's about 600,000 people living there. So how do we right-size these communities according to this new economic and social reality? Another challenge that we have is how we can manage our small towns and rural areas so that they can retain their local culture, that agrarian rural culture, and also protect the natural resources and ecologies, as well as encourage self-reliance and strengthen local economies. So the idea here is that we want to maintain that rural community, that sense of community at the rural level, and also build a sense of, or build self-reliance in these communities. And finally, there's an approach. One of the challenges that we are trying to meet is how do we protect entire ecosystems defined in terms of their vegetation, in terms of the water and all, the air. How can we protect them as an entire system? Okay, so comprehensive planning within the field of planning can be understood to be a framework for strategic land use planning to encourage sustainable development. This is done through, obviously, comprehensive plans. They're called comprehensive because they correspond to all of the community functions over an extended period of time, generally 20 to 25 years. Then this planning effort also involves integrating a network of territorial and or functional plans. By territorial we mean neighborhood, districts, subsections, spatial divisions of a community. And then by functional plans we're really referring to such things as housing and transportation and recreation. All tend to be on a shorter term basis, say 5 years, and they also tend to be very more technical than the comprehensive plan. Now, the comprehensive planning process is really you could think of it as an inverted triangle as presented here. That you have this comprehensive effort to gather intelligence, that is the values and the science that defines the community. And as you gather that information, you use that to inform a vision of the community, and that vision then is used to formulate goals. In other words, these goals are all for the purpose of attaining that vision. And then under the goals you have a series of objectives which are ways that the goals can be achieved. Goals are generally broad statements. We want to have a transportation system that serves all of our residents, and then we would do that by providing multiple transportation opportunities, and then that would be an objective, and then from those objectives then emanate specific policies. For example, we might buy more buses, or we might develop more pedestrian walkways. Now, not included on this is then the comprehensive planning process does include, as a crucial aspect, monitoring the results and to just see if we're proceeding in a way that will achieve the vision that we have of our community. Now, one of the newer ways of engaging in comprehensive planning is to use a scenario building approach to creating that vision of community. And it's a little bit different than has been traditionally the case. In planning the vision, it may be this ideal kind of community that we want to have, versus under scenario building, it's what are the likely communities that we will find in the future. What type of community are we likely to be? So this is a relatively new approach that involves an assessment of what is likely to happen, and it's based on facts about key drivers, and drivers are the external forces that are operating on our community related to environment, related to economy. For example, globalization would be viewed as a key driver. Perhaps global warming may be viewed as a key driver. So this assessment of key drivers is then combined with an internal investigation of the facts, how these drivers are affecting us, and then how we might respond to these drivers. So every community is not necessarily going to respond to globalization in the same way. It would depend on their values, how, to the extent to which we're being affected by these drivers, and really our capacity, that is our political, our cultural, our technical, our financial wherewithal. What is our capacity to respond to these key drivers? So this is a hard-nosed, multifaceted assessment. And this produces a series of storylines of possible futures. Again, these are not ideal futures. These are, if the driver is this, then this is how we will likely respond. And incorporated into this is a recognition of our weaknesses, so that we don't fool ourselves about how we're likely to respond. So scenario building is an important new emerging kind of approach to planning.